the American Adoption Congress 13th International Conference, April 11th to the 14th, 1991 in Garden Grove, California. This is program number D151, tape 35.
Okay, we start. Nice to have you here. I will first tell you something about the situation of the adoption center in Holland. I work at the University of Utrecht, and we have created over there the adoption center. That is a university, part of the university. And since about 72, we are working on adoption. In the beginning we started on intercountry adoption, but our field has widened, and now we are working for intercountry domestic adoption, for birth parents, adoptees and adoptive parents. In the beginning we were concentrated on adoptive parents, more or less, but now it has all widened. We have a lot more experience now, so that is the reason, mainly. So we are working for about 20 years in this field and doing a lot of research with students, of course, with the help of students, and they have the possibility to do a part of their education in adoption. So each year a couple of, say, 20, 30 are finishing their study with the specialization on adoption. Of course we have more tasks than only research, education, but also informing people about the developments of adoption in Holland and all sorts of information we get from other countries as well. We have made a bulletin, and I would like to give that to you, and you can even become member, but I don't know whether you have the possibility to become a member of that bulletin. That is our information task. We summarize articles and books in English, also in Dutch of course, so we have a Dutch and an English version, and we try to keep everyone informed about developments of adoption, new procreation techniques, step-parent adoption, so the whole field. And this is very new. You get the English translation. It was just done a week ago, just before I left for the States. Okay, something about the history of intercountry adoption. Do you know something about it?
No, not really.
Not really. Okay. Intercountry adoption on a larger scale started immediately after World War II. Hundreds of children from Germany were adopted by American families. In fact, it started in America on a larger scale. And some years later, these and other, you could call European adoptions, because they adopted children from Germany, also took place in the West European countries. For instance, in Holland, we have adopted hundreds of children from Austria, Germany, Yugoslavia, countries like that, after the Second World War. Some years later, Greece, because our law is since '56. So the children arrived earlier, but they could be adopted only after '56. Then we had a law. Intercountry adoption in the form of interracial adoption occurred as American soldiers and their families adopted thousands of children from the war-ravaged countries of Asia. Think of South Korea, think of Japan. And when you think of figures, now about 70,000 children from South Korea are adopted in America. 70,000. That is a lot. So in some years, thousands of them arrived from South Korea in America. And altogether 30,000, about, these are estimations, 30,000 in Europe. And in Holland, I know the exact number, 3,800 from South Korea. But many countries are involved, not only South Korea, though that is a main country. It was a main country. It will stop its intercountry adoption program in 95. Hello. Please join us. Hello. I was expecting more people, but, you know, perhaps Disneyland or whatever. I've just started to say something about intercountry adoption. An important fact for the development of intercountry adoption has been a number of influential alterations in our culture. Think of the important changes with regard to the place of women in society, other ideas about sexuality, abortion, and one-parent families, all those developments. This evolution has almost stopped, and that is important, in-country adoption. And that is my first sheet. When you look at the graphic, at the line down, you see Dutch adopted children. That means Dutch adoptees. You see that in the years are in the middle, 72, 74, 76, 78. You see that? You see that the line has fallen, and the number now is 2 to 4 per million of inhabitants. 2 to 4. And do you have an idea how many there are in America? Domestic adoptions?
We have tried to get those kind of statistics a lot, and there's real problems. The Child Welfare League has tried, and because of the different kinds of adoptions, they've been unable to coordinate all of those statistics.
But I know the figures.
Do you?
I think I do. Not precise figures.
You mean the percentage?
No, I'm talking about absolute figures. And over 100,000 domestic adoptions in the States. And you have about 220 million or 240 million of inhabitants. I talk about North America. 240 million, I think. We have about 15 million. We have 30 children per year for domestic adoption on 15 million of inhabitants. And in the States about 100,000 or more domestic adoptions still on a factor 10, 15 higher, 100,000, 30 to 100,000. That means about 500. When you look at the 2 to 4 and the 500 per million, that's a lot. So the difference is very interesting, and in fact we should start a large study why this difference exists between the Scandinavian countries, Holland, Belgium. You have a little bit more domestic adoptions in Germany and in France and in Italy, though I don't know the precise figures, I'm sure of that. It is lowest in the Scandinavian countries and Holland and Belgium. It's an interesting point, perhaps a point for you. So, in Holland now, you see the line on top, that is the number of children placed for an adoption. Can I?
So you're saying there's very few Dutch children placed for adoption?
Almost none. 2 to 4 per million of inhabitants, that's nothing. 30 altogether. 30 to 40 altogether on the whole country. And there's a country of 15 million of inhabitants.
But this is the number of...
That's the number of...
intercountry adoptions.
Yeah, placed foreign children. And you see that that number has increased between 70 and 86. A little bit of change, but that doesn't really matter. You could say on the average we have about 1,000 children adopted from foreign countries per year.
1,000? Do you know
About 1,000.
Do you know what the figures are for the United States?
In the book of Simon and Alstein, they have the new book of Simon and Alstein. There is an article of the States, Simon and Alstein, you know them, I suppose. Simon, S-I-M-O-N, and Alstein, A-L-T-S-T-E-I-N. And they are working at the American University in Washington. They are in Washington, D.C. And they just wrote a book, and it is an article of mine as well, therefore I know it so well, article of mine as well, about adoption in Holland. And it is all about intercountry adoption, that book, that very book. It should be here, in fact, for sale, for it is very new.
Name of the book?
I should know that. Perhaps I have it in my article. Let me see. I think it has to do with transracial adoption, but I have other books here, but not that book.
Do you know what the number of adoptions, intercountry adoptions, is per year in the United States?
I think it is not as high as the number of domestic adoptions. It is quite high, tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands?
Tens of thousands, yes, from many countries. South Korea, the Philippines, India, and especially South America, Colombia, Ecuador, and countries like that. Okay.
And now Romania.
Hey?
Romania.
Yeah, that has started slowly, but I don't think that will be large numbers, because you have the AIDS problem over there. You know that. Quite a few children have got the sickness of AIDS, or are seropositive due to the blood. Okay. When I would like to say something about the research we do in Holland at the adoption center. I just said something about the adoption center. That is that we have some main projects, and I will say some more about the project of failed adoptions. But we have some more projects, and one is very large, that is about experimental longitudinal study, an experimental longitudinal study on attachment.
On what?
Attachment. And we are using Bowlby and Ainsworth. Do you know those?
Yes, I've been doing training at Evergreen with the Attachment Center.
Oh, then you know all about it. Okay, you have heard of that, attachment and Bowlby, the theory of Bowlby and the strange situation of Ainsworth. We are doing this for adoptive children arrived in Holland under the age of 5 months from Sri Lanka and from South Korea. And we do it in two parts. One part is only children arrived in families without biological children, the first child who has arrived, and that is an adoptee from Sri Lanka or South Korea in the age of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 months. And the second part is the same sort of children arrived, same age, but with families where one biological child is there already, at least one. But it should be the first adoptive child, because we have noticed that there is quite a lot of difference in the success between those two kinds of families, with and without biological children. The second big project, I will tell more about it soon, that is on failed adoptions. We have noticed that about 6% of all intercountry adoptions could be mentioned, not really failed, but those families need a time of residential care for their child. The child has to be sent to an institution for child care, or an observational clinic, or whatever kind that is.
It's only 6%?
That is 6%. But we don't say only. We say that is too much. Okay, I talk later.
I would have expected it to be higher.
Perhaps, I think so, but still 6% is a lot. And that is residential care. But I don't talk about the children who were sent to other families, say, after half a year of stay in Holland and not using professional care. For I am using only the group which has needed professional care. So there are more failed adoptions, perhaps altogether 8%. I'm not completely sure, but a part of those 6% go back to the families, a quarter. So that is the second project. The third project has to do with children from India. We try to measure self-esteem and identity. That is the third project. The fourth project has just started, and that is a study from Thailand, children from Thailand. I have brought a small book with me. The first study is published in this book, and the second study we have just started, and that is a longitudinal study. This book is from '87, and we have got the whole group of children from Thailand, and that means 116, and they are now in their period of adolescence, and we are studying now the group of children who are 15, 16 years of age. That means that we need another 2 years to finish that study. And the response rate of this study, when the children were 5, 6 years younger, was 96%. So we really have the whole group. So that's fine. That's the third study. The study of the children on India is almost finished, and we hope to finalize our report this year. But there are some complexities with the researchers. She has got a child, and so it is a little bit of delay, but we hope to finish it. The ELO, what we call the experimental longitudinal studies on attachment, will be finished this year and next year.
How are you measuring? What are you doing in that study on attachment?
We are using the strange situation, and we are trying to improve the responsiveness of the mother. And we are doing that in giving a book and in giving information. We have two sorts of experimental groups, and we have one control group. We don't do anything. So we have third groups with, to make it more complicated, we have third groups with the first part of the study and two groups with the second part, with biological children. And there we have only one experimental group. We are only, we give a book with information in the second part. But okay, we have two experiments. And I can already say that there seem to be some effects, positive effects of the experiment. The important thing is that we do this study together with 4 other universities, and they have other groups. Premature children, low socio-economic level, that's another group at another university, and children with a hair lip. You got it? Mm-hmm. With a hair lip. So, and adopted children. We have adoptees. So you have 4 groups of children, and they are compared as well. But the main thing is that we compare within the adoption groups, of course, the control group with the experimental groups, and we try to improve the responsiveness. And so we try to improve the whole situation of attachment, because that is the main thing in adoptive families, right. Attachment.
Right.
Or
so you have one group where you give them education and a book.
We have one group, we give a little bit of education, only a little bit, and the book with information.
Okay.
And we have one group with less, because they don't get the book.
Just education?
Just education, a little bit of information.
Okay, and then one group where you do nothing?
No, control group.
And is there another group then?
No.
That's it? Okay.
Yeah.
Educate. What book do you use?
That is a book about how to, no, not a special book. It is just an information how to behave yourself as a child when the child is asking you something, and that is in Dutch, and I didn't take it with me, but please wait till we have much more information. But it is a little book which the mother can read, and which gives her information about how to behave with a young child. So not a thick
It's
book.
not specific to attachment.
It is to responsiveness. It is specific to responsiveness, and it has to do with attachment. The goal is to improve the attachment.
Right.
In the positive way, of course. So I said something about 4 projects, and the 5th one is, I got some money to start it, but not enough, but still I got some. That is about roots. We have a group of about 400 children from Greece, and they arrived in the 60s. That means that they are all adult now. And I would like to find out the quantity and quality of their roots, needs of roots. How many went to Greece? What did they do over there? And what is the quality of integration in the Dutch society? And are there connections between that integration and the needs of their roots or whatever? Because in former studies was said, Triceliotis was said, perhaps you have heard of Triceliotis, that is a Greece researcher, and okay. He has said that in a book which appeared in 71 or 72, In Search of Origins, that was quite a connection between the situation in the adoptive family and the need to find your roots.
Right.
And Betty Jean Lifton later said, all adoptees have this need of roots. So I would like to find out what sort of connection there is. Time has changed, 20 years later. I talk about a study done in the 60s and beginning 70s by John Triceliotis, and we are now in the 19th.
How are you measuring attachment? What is your measurement?
That is, we are using the strange situation.
Is it observational?
Yeah, observational. We use videos. We have put it on video, and it is measured by these observations. It is rather complicated, in fact. We see the children every 3 months, at 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 18 months, and 30 months. And of course the parents are interviewed in the beginning. We have a lot of information of the parents. And then we do observational studies. For instance, the child has to play with something, or has to react on some instruments, and when it is 9 months and 12 months, and we try to see the changes. And at the strange situation is used at 12 months, I just say it by head, and 18 months, and of course we have this A, B, and C groups.
Right.
Of course we have that. We don't use the D group. We don't have the, you know what I mean, the D group, we don't use that. A, B, and C.
Which group is the D group?
Yeah, that is a new idea,
Oh.
but we don't use that. I'm only saying that. And of course we have, most of the children are in the B group, that means safely attached. But a few are in the A and C group. But I should not tell.
Which group is well attached?
Yeah, well attached.
And what is A?
A is, how do you call that in English?
Anxious? Anxiously?
I think that is the anxiously, yeah, and
then C is
yeah, what is the, I know the Dutch.
unattached?
No, not unattached, no, but
Ambivalent?
yeah, I think it is that group, ambivalent, yeah. But you will get much more information if you give me your address, and
Right.
you will get much better information. This only,
How long has the study been?
it is a study altogether of 6-7 years, and we are almost at the end now. It is a PhD for my colleague Jeffer, and the results are coming up now, this year.
Oh, great.
So it is far. We started it 5 years ago or so. And we have got some money to continue the study. So this really a nice study. Okay, but let's go on. Yeah? When I talk about research in inter-country adoption, you could see that the first research in inter-country adoption were evaluations done by Kirk in the 50s even, a little bit, but Fenchel, Grow and Shapiro and others. And sometimes they didn't use a control group. They were interviewing adoptive parents and that was it. In fact, my first study was the same. We didn't even interview, we sent a mail questionnaire to the adoptive parents, about 350. We had a high response to 500 and we had a response of 350, something like that, 65% or so. And that gave a lot of information about motives to adopt an inter-country and foreign child and so on. But since the 80s, the need to have much more information of the child itself was felt. And you could say there was a need for more sophisticated research. In the beginning of the 80s, large numbers of inter-country adopted children had reached the stage of adolescence. And it became clear that just those adolescents had given quite a lot of problems in the families. And there was a connection with the motives of the parents. I call the adoptive parents divided in 3 generations. The first generation of adoptive parents has adopted a child before the 70s, so in the 50s and 60s, in Holland and also in other countries, I think. And I call that the closed traditional generation. That's the closed traditional generation of adoptive parents. What kind of generation is that? You could say that they were grown up to keep adoption as more or less as a secret for the social surrounding, not for the child. Some did keep it secret, as in America and other countries. Most of them were told that, all of them were told you should tell the child that it is adopted, but some didn't. Some didn't. Like in America, like in all countries. Domestic adoptions I talk about now.
How would they do that though with the child being so different?
No, I talk about domestic adoptions. In the 50s and 60s you only had domestic and white with white, European white with white. So there was no problem. You had no need to tell due to the race. So before the 70s, before the inter-country adoption started in Europe and enlarged in America, the adoptive parents were quite different from the adoptive parents later on. Therefore I call them the closed traditional generation. And they also accepted all sorts of regulations and procedures. They were glad to have the child, and they accepted some very strange, no, not very strange, some hard things in the law and so on. But then things changed at the end of the 60s. The progressive, idealistic generation arrived. And the TV has been very important for that, because we saw on TV in Holland and other countries the catastrophe for millions of children in Africa, in South Korea, in Vietnam and so on. And we saw the situation of all those children and starving to death. And people became really emotional of the situation of these children. And many of them said, okay, let's adopt that child. So in the beginning of the 70s, many parents asked for an intercountry adoptee. And that is the reason that you see in the beginning of the 70s the number of foreign children increasing, but the other number decreasing a lot. You could say that in a few years' time in Holland, the number of domestic adoptions decreased from 750 in 1970, 750, in 5 years' time to 100, 120 or 140. So that is very quick. So in 5 years' time, between 70 and 75, the picture has changed completely. Only intercountry adoptions almost, and no domestic adoptions anymore. And then slowly it decreased till about 30, 40 now. And we are not in favor of domestic adoptions anymore in Holland. Not at all. I mean, when a young girl gets a child, teenager pregnancy, the people are more or less influenced to keep the child because the child has its grandparents, and the culture has changed completely. It has to do with another view at sex. Sex is not a forbidden thing. You have to be careful, of course. You shouldn't get a child when you are 17. But if you get a child, okay, you keep it. And the economic situation has changed a lot. I mean, when you get a child when you are 17, you get some money. You can even live on your own because social welfare will help you. It's no richdom, of course, but social welfare will really help you if your parents don't want to help you. You can keep the child. I'm not saying that that is a very nice situation for that child. I'm not saying that, but things have changed. But, so I have two generations. Traditional, that's the first generation. The idealistic, progressive is the second. But by the end of the 70s, a lot of problems with the adolescents became clear at the end of the 70s. And you could say that I will read now part of it, for this is an important part of my... As I said earlier, the active groups of adoptive parents, the group of idealistic progressives, were a very active group who have to cope with intense family problems, confronted us with some fundamental behavior and educational problems. These very active group of parents of the 70s confronted us with psychological problems. We didn't think so much of psychological problems in the 70s. We were coping with juridical problems, with problems doing foreign adoptions with other countries together, and the procedures, but not education and psychology. But that parents and child, okay, let's leave that. Where parents appear to have an insufficient sense of emotional bonding with the child, a sometimes almost complete lack of emotional empathy with their child may be observed. And that is what we noticed, that some children didn't have any feelings of attachment with the parents and the other way around. On the other hand, some children suffer from what is sometimes called the no ground syndrome. That is what some people call it, no ground syndrome. That means that the child has no possibilities to be attached to adults, the no ground system. It hasn't been educated in the first years of life to have that possibility for attachment. And I don't say that all children who have not been educated have had the possibility to attach themselves to caretakers or to a mother or to whatever person. I don't say that all those children won't be able to attach themselves later on to the adoptive parents or another person, but quite a few don't. So these children with no ground syndrome have problems with showing their emotions at the right moment. Their conscience shows many gaps, and in general their social communication is poor. Is the risk of lack of feelings of attachment higher in adoptive families? The answer has to be yes. But also I'd say this is not the most important question. Much more important is, how do you stimulate attachment between adoptee and his new parents? And that is the two research projects we have. Okay. And determine and determine what to do if the level of attachment doesn't reach an acceptable level. So now I come to my study on disruption. A major concern of adoption professionals and adoptive families is whether adopted children are more at risk for emotional disturbances than other children. And we see a lot of literature on that. I don't go through that literature. I have my article here. It will be published, I think. It will be published in the book, which will come out. But I have a few copies left, and I will give you that. I will now outline some main results of our research project in which we studied the phenomenon of adoption, disruption in inter-country adoptions. We started this study in 1981, and I just said that at the end of the 70s, in the beginning of the 80s, the third generation of adoptive parents arrived. And the third generation I call the economic realistic generation. The economic realistic generation. Why do I call this generation economic realistic? That is, they know a lot more about the psychological problems of inter-country adoptees, a lot more. Books have been published in the 80s. Articles were written. And we have had a lot of programs on TV. Adoptive parents telling stories about catastrophes in their families, about the problems they have with the child. Sometimes even a divorce happened because father and mother were quarreling about, that was not the only problem, but it was one of the big problems. And that is the realism. An inter-country adopted child is not just the paradise of love which is arriving in your family. It is a human being which might give a lot of problems. So realism. Economic, why do I call it economic? Inter-country adoption has become much more expensive than in the 70s. When you adopt a child from some country, you might need, it is less than in America, but still it is a lot of money. You might need something like $8,000 to $10,000, $11,000 even. So that's quite an amount. That is for the professionals in Holland, for the professionals in, say, South Korea or in Colombia. It's for a trip. And quite a few parents have to go there. Sometimes both of them, at least one of them. So the child cannot be escorted in a group of 3 children by a stranger. So you have to go there yourself. And in Brazil you have to stay for 4 weeks. That costs a lot of money. Okay, economic. And that means that the new group of parents are thinking more of, is the paradise of love with a child worth $10,000? And we know now that it is not a paradise sometimes. We know now that it gives a lot of problems. So that is first. And second, we have noticed that the new parents are not so eager to support our projects, the projects in the third world we have from the adoption agencies. They send a lot of money to small projects. For instance, a child's institution and making a new playground or whatever, small projects. You have to think of a couple of thousands of dollars. Sometimes they will build a new house and that is tens of thousands of dollars, but that's a big project. And the adoptive parents are not so eager to give money. In the 70s they were very easy, but the salaries were also a little bit better then. So things have changed, therefore economic. I will write down an article on the generations thing, the generation of adoptive parents, but that is a different thing. Now, I have my second table now. That is my second sheet. That gives some figures. Do you see it? Yes. The number and percentage of intercountry adopted children in residential care, years of arrival 74, 78. And that is why I say it is almost 6%. 6%. For technical reasons we have counted it on those years because we could figure out precise figures. So that's for technical reasons. And you say it is rather stable, the number. And 78 is a little bit less because the children were younger when they arrived. So, but more interest is the characteristics of adoptive families with a child in residential care compared with other adoptive families. So we compared two groups of adoptive families, one with a child in residential care and one without a child in residential care. You see, a higher average age of parents in the group with experience of residential care. Higher social economic class. You wouldn't expect that. But why is that? It has to do with expectations. When you grow up in a family where it is normal that you are intelligent and go to not only to high school but to university and do well, no problems at school, and when that is the culture in that whole family for years, and suddenly a child which is a little bit less intelligent arrives, you get disappointed as parents, and you have to change your mind, change your expectations, and that sometimes is a little bit too difficult, but that is only one factor. It's only one factor. I'm not saying that is the main factor, but
This is the end of side A. Please turn your tape over and continue on side B.
influence the whole situation negatively. More families with biological children, and that has to do with what I just said, the difference in expectations. Larger families. The best situation was 2 adoptive children in a family on a moderate level, economically spoken. More sibling placements, more placements as an older or in-between child. What is an in-between child? That is, there is already a child, say 5 years of age, and there is another child, say 2 years, and in between the adoptee is 3 years or 4 years. The best placements on the average are the younger children, as the youngest, placed as the youngest child. Less age difference between the children in the family. That's also a negative factor. If the child is only half a year or a year younger or older than the child which is there already, that is not so good. At least 2 years age difference is a better factor. Okay. Then we compared the differences between parents with a child in residential care and a matched group of parents again. And we saw these differences. There was less social support for the residential group of parents. And the social support, you have to think of neighbors, grandparents of the child, so the parents of the parents, their friends. Interesting is factor B as well, shorter waiting time, less than 1 year for the child. The waiting time for an intercountry adoptee now is about 4 or 5 years, now 3 to 5 years. When you would like to have an older child, the waiting time is not even 3 years. Then it's about 2 years. But if you really would like to have a very young child, under 1 year of age, then the waiting time is 4 years. But what we found was that some children are placed very quickly. More or less unexpectedly. And that is the reason. Parents were not prepared enough. Then first encounter with the child was bad. That we saw as well, that in the residential group many parents said from the beginning on, one or both parents, but mostly one, had a bad feeling about it. No connection with the child and so. Larger families, I told you that already, and the residential group had more deprived children. And of course that is a very important factor in the adoptee. The adoptee was much more complicated, of course. That is like the first, less social support. That is what we know. What we did as well was interviewing. It is a large project, as you will understand. I hope I will be able to have it translated. We are finishing now the second book. I hope I will be able to have it translated in English, or perhaps I do it myself, but that is costs a lot of time. We also have interviewed 40 adolescents who had the disruption experience, who were in residential care, with a control group, a matched group, non-disruption. 40 as well, 40 compared with 40, okay? And these are the differences between the two groups. So in the disruption group you see more divorces of the parents, more parents with biological children, larger families, more what we call a negative placement as an older or in-between child. The physical situation at arrival of the child worse. So you see factors for the parents and for the children. Just go see the toilet. There's another interesting difference between the disruption group and the control group. You see, N is 40, the number is 40 for the disruption group, and the number is 13 for the control group. It is 40, but only 13 had important problems. The other 27 have not. And you see, when do they arise, those problems? The interesting thing is that in the disruption group, for the biggest group, they arise in the first year of arrival, so in the beginning. What does this tell you? These statistics, that as soon as you have important problems with your child, I talk about important problems, and not just sleeping problems or eating problems, you really have to be alert of influencing the situation in your family. Otherwise, you will have many more problems. The problems will be cumulative. Is that the right word? So you have to be very alert on the problems in the beginning. And you see in the other group, it is divided in the years for the control group. You have 2 in the beginning, but later on you have the biggest number. But in the other group, say about 35% is in the first year, and in the control group, say 15%. So that is for small groups, but this is very significant. Then we have used the child behavior checklist of Achenbach. Perhaps you have heard of that, the child behavior checklist, to compare the disruption group with the control group. And we did write down the items where the disruption group scores 3 times or more higher than the control group. So that is a lot higher. And what you see is, for instance, the medical things, that's asthma. Okay, but look at F. I fight a lot, so I mean aggressiveness. And also a lack of social relationships. For instance, social ideas. I do not see difficulties. I attack other people. And of course, the stealing and lying items. I steal outside my home. I will give you my article. I have 2 copies left, so you don't need to write it all down. So, but now, of more importance, of course, is what can you do? Where is the light? That is what we have decided in Holland is first to improve the preparation of adoptive parents a lot. And now they get a course, and that is obliged even to follow a course, and that is 6 sessions for all adoptive parents who want to adopt an Intercountry a foreign child. Second, we try to improve the aftercare. We do quite a lot of consultation and also some therapy we did at the adoption center, where I am the director of. But we also try to influence the treatments, the agencies who treat all sorts of children and also adoptees. For instance, the adoption center is asked to give a course to social workers, psychologists on adoption. And we are just on our way to organize that course. We might have the first course for those social workers and professionals by the end of this year. We are asked to organize something, and we are paid for that, of course. We have organized at the adoption center courses for adoptive parents who already had a child, who have that child for years. And we are doing the course for the second time now, and I'm glad to be able to say that the evaluation of the first course was very positive, but also some problems, and we have changed it a little bit. I talk now about 9 sessions, what we do at the adoption center. 9 sessions, 9 evenings, say between 7:30 and 9:45 at the university, and we are using films, radio programs. We give a lot of information of our attachment project. We talk about roots. We talk about the history of adoption. We talk about adoptive generations. We talk about the disruptions, the residential group. We talk about the treatment of adoptive families. So we give a lot of information. So first, preparation of parents. Second, aftercare. What is important is that we try to tell adoptive parents, please don't expect too much of your child. And perhaps you expect a lot. If these expectations are not fulfilled, lower down your expectations and learn to live with a child that does not reply to all your good feelings, good intentions, okay? Lower down your level of feeling and expectations with your child. That means that, for instance, if the child has a lower level of attachment with you, for instance, it doesn't talk with you about emotions and doesn't show, I say it a bit rude, but I don't mean no emotions, but less than you would like to. Accept it. Accept the child as it is, and perhaps it is emotional handicapped. Accept that handicap. Don't expect that the child will hug you. For instance, it might never do, or when it grows up, when a child is 3 years of age, it will do, I think. Most of them do a little bit at least. But when it grows up, it might avoid all sort of physical contact with adults. Okay, you can try to approach, but don't force anything on the child, and accept if it never happens. On the other hand, see the progress in the behavior of the child, and a little progress can give you a lot of joy. See that. Be aware of little progresses. Do you understand what I say? So that is how we try to teach parents, and that they lower down the level of expectation. That's very important. That means that we also tell parents that sometimes it does not click between you and the child, and it never will. Accept that risk. So when you adopt a child, we tell them that. Accept that risk. It sometimes doesn't click. It sometimes doesn't click also between a biological child and the parents. But you always have the responsibility for the child, whether it is your child's nature or an adoptee. You always have to accept the responsibility, even if the child has left you and never sees you again. But that is not my point now. Important is that we also tell the parents that for an adoptee, the adoptive parents, especially when it is an adoptee from South Korea or Vietnam or Thailand or Ecuador or whatever country from far, these adoptive children only have adoptive parents, and mostly they don't have other relatives. I mean, the relatives of the adoptive parents are often not so much interested in that adoptee. There is no blood connection, and a blood connection means something. That is what you know, it is what we all know, it means something. And if it is not there, then you look at the person. Do you like that person? And why should you like the adoptee? Perhaps you like the adoptee, perhaps you don't. But it is a stranger, complete stranger, isn't it? It belongs to your brother. Okay, but that is the decision of your brother. What I try to say is, of course, quite a few adoptees have a nice adoptive family and really have, for instance, I have seen that some grandparents love the adoptee, of course. But what I try to say is that that is not as it is with biological children. So they have a higher risk to become isolated, and that they only have one house of the adoptive parents. And the risk to become isolated is much bigger for adoptees than it is for adoptees from foreign countries, than it is for adoptees from domestic adoptions, than it is for biological children. And that we teach adoptive parents as well. And that means that they really have to consider the situation when they need residential care, and when perhaps there are feelings of negative feelings for the child. Okay, and too many children are involved with that, so we are working hard to decrease the number of residential care. Okay, I think I have told enough now. Do you agree that I should stop now? And
Yeah.
you have your questions, of course.
You know, one of the things that concerns me about saying to parents, just accept that your child may never want to touch you, is, to me, that feels like you're saying, accept that this child will never be attached.
No, attachment is much more complicated.
I know.
Of course.
Have you read the book Holding Time?
No.
I am using it with a lot of my adoptive parents. It's a book about recreating the attachment process that many of these children missed in infancy.
You have a card. You have a card, eh? Could you please write down the book on the back of your...
We even have it here in our bookstore.
Oh, you have it?
We're selling it here.
Holding.
In our bookstore. Holding Time. I mean, I am working with a little 5-year-old who, her mother fell, and it was an infant adoption from the hospital. And the mother describes this baby as never being able to be comforted when she held her like this.
The no ground syndrome.
Right. And so the mother kept trying to find ways to help the baby stop crying, and she held her face outward. And so what we are doing is doing holding time and recreating the attachment process between this child and mother, and it is astounding. This child fights it and then regresses to like an infant stage and starts playing peekaboo with her mother and touching her face. And ever since we started doing this, the mother said she has, for the first time in her life, come running up to her and hugged her and said, "I love you, Mommy." And she had never done that before. So I think
that is a success.
I think that sometimes there's an interactional process that the children, for some reason, either because of genetic predisposition or, have you read The Secret Life of the Unborn Child?
No, yeah.
you know, I don't know about that. I happen to have worked with this child's birth mother,
Oh,
and so I know how ambivalent the birth mother
Oh.
was. And I think this child was very set up. And in the hospital with the birth mother was already starting to be a failure to thrive child.
oh yeah.
When the birth mother
Yeah.
started feeding her, she started losing weight.
Oh,
When the adoptive mother took over, she started gaining weight.
yeah,
Oh.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
But there-
Interesting, eh? Interesting, these things.
It's a fascinating case because I have so many attachments, but this child was, I think, set up for attachment
Yeah,
problems.
yeah, yeah.
And this
I should buy that book of yours.
It is so exciting.
Holding this in the second book, in the big book.
Especially when you work with children like 7 and younger. The response for that age child is amazing. They will go back and show you where they got stuck in those first 3 years.
Where are you working?
Here in Tustin, at Parenting Resources.
And in Houston,
No, California.
in California.
Right
I see.
here in Orange.
Oh, right here. Oh, you're lucky. Not so far. Eh?
Right.
Have you got your card?
Yes, because I wanted.
And I would like to present 2 things. I already gave that to you, and I would like to give that to you as well. We are making a bulletin. Perhaps you have the possibility to become one of our members. There is a inside.
Oh, great.
We make a bibliography. And of all new books and new articles of importance on adoption, step-parent adoption, procreation techniques. And I have also, thank you, and I have also brought my 2 books. This is on the study from Thailand, and that is that book is $8. I have to ask you $8 for it. And this book is about intercountry adoption of 14 countries, and that's an article, the Swedish intercountry adoption, and the Dutch, and from England, and from America, and so on. 14 countries. That is also sold here in the bookshop, and I have three more here.
So this is a study about how they're doing.
Yeah, this gives a lot of information, and we are also comparing some domestic adoptions in the States with the group from Thailand in this study. That is a study done by David Kirk.
Oh, right.
I will try to find my articles.
This is the end of this session.
We finish.
You finished?
Yeah, yeah.